Nick Brada. Very good. Thank you so much. Nick brought up some of the ironic hypocrisies of the U.S. state and getting a little bit of attention from them. Our next speaker is, as a member of the International People's Democratic Uhuru movement, very, very familiar with that. This is a gentleman who knows about getting attention from the FBI, the repression of activists that they are capable of. I want to bring up Oronde Shakur of the Uhuru movement. Please give him a warm welcome.
Uhuru. My name is Oronde Shakur, and I'm a member of the International People's Democratic Uhuru movement. We work under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. This is a different venue from where we usually do our work. We normally in the hood, but I see my comrade here on the stage. Our organization was organized in the city of Fred Hampton in Chicago, and it was done purposely because the work of Fred Hampton and the Black Panther Party was the kind of work that NPDOM was organized to do. In the period where the U.S. colonial capitalist government was waging war against the African community through COINTELPRO. And they were flooding our communities with drugs and guns and misinformation. Once they destroyed the revolutionary organizations that was formed during the 1960s, and they killed off the leadership. We have a comrade, Oronde Shakur, who's still in Cuba. We have other comrades who's locked down in U.S. prisons, our political prisoners and prisoners of war, left there to die. Some have been let go from the work of the people on the ground. But that left our whole community demoralized. There was a lot of hope and aspirations from the Black Power movement, that people had hope that we would see that freedom that we all talked about and read about. And the assassination of all those leaders, and Dr. King, who was a person of peace, nonviolence. But he was violently assassinated, shot in the throat to give us a message. This is what happens when you talk against colonialism, capitalism. They shot him in the throat. That was a clear message. So NPDOM was put on the ground to bring African working class back into revolutionary political life. To complete the process of revolution in our community that started in the 1960s. And I say that because even though I recognize that the resistance to colonialism, capitalism, and imperialism began in Africa in the 1400s when Europeans first stepped foot on the continent of Africa. There was fierce resistance to that invasion, that occupation. Thousands and thousands upon Africans died in that resistance. And even in chains and on ships heading to the New World, Africans was on the ships resisting and taking over some ships and turning them back to Africa, where they belong. And all since that, there's 600 years, approximately, that African people has been in war with white power imperialism, colonialism. Because all that was born in Africa, and it will end in Africa and by African people to liberate our continent, to liberate our people all over the world. And we cut off the lifeline of this parasitic system that sucks the blood of all the people on the planet Earth. Africa being the major source of wealth and income for imperialism through colonialism and neo-colonialism. Even if we have black faces in high places on the continent, in the Caribbean, where we are, they work for our enemies. They killed our heroes and sheroes and jailed them and chased others underground. In 1972, the African People's Socialist Party was founded by Chairman Omali Yeshitela and others with the mission to complete the Black Revolution of the 1960s. And that's the period where the whole world was in that trajectory of having revolutionary struggle all over the world. People were fighting against this oppressor, this colonialism, this imperialism, this white power. During that process, and we understand that this struggle is protracted, you know what I mean? And we're still losing people, in this struggle. And they're trying everything in possibly can to, again, demoralize people from struggling against the oppression. But this time we have a revolutionary party that has over 50 years of still experience in struggle, in revolutionary struggle, and has summed up those experiences that we've had from 1492 all the way up until today, and has deposited in the African People's Socialist Party in the revolutionary theory that we call African internationalism. And it's not just a theory to explain the world, it's a theory for African people and other colonized people to change the world and reflect their own selfish interests, their own class interests, rather than the interests of imperialism. That's the struggle. And I think Fidel Castro said that we're in a struggle between the past and the future, a struggle to the death. Imperialism, colonialism represents the past. From our perspective, African internationalism, socialism represents the future. And that future cannot be intimidated, and it can't be stopped. FBI, CIA, NSA, Biden, anyone who represents imperialism don't have enough to stop people's aspirations. And like our comrade Fred said, that you can kill, jail, hound revolutionaries. I'm just adding on to that. But you can't kill the revolution, because the revolution represents the aspirations of the people, of the masses. And African people is in the center of that. We didn't ask to be. We didn't ask to be here. And if you recognize, I have an African name because I'm African. And I had to give up a colonial name in order to do that. And, people said that the first part of revolution is change, changing your mind. But also for African people, it's changing our names so we can identify where we came from and ask the question of, if we're from Africa, why are we in this place called America? How did we get here? We didn't buy planes or boat tickets to get here. As the chairman said, we came here through the point of a gun, cannon, whips, etc. That's how we got here. We don't identify ourselves as, African Americans or Negroes or none of that. We are Africans, plain and simple. And that's important to say, and it's important to have a revolutionary African organization like the African People's Socialist Party and our leader, Chairman Omala Yesa Taylor, and the National Central Committee of the African People's Socialist Party. As you may all know, that before I get to July 29th, let me talk about July 2nd in St. Petersburg, Florida, where the party has had its headquarters, and there's a Uhuru house that's been in that community for decades. So on July 2nd, 2 days before the imperialist celebration of the July 4th, someone pulled up to the Uhuru house, where our Uhuru house is, and outside of all our institutions, we raise up the red, black, and green, the flag that Marcus Garvey and UNITA gave to African people to represent our nation. And there's a flagpole and this 50-foot RBG flag. And in the middle of the day, someone pulled up in their vehicle, opened the trunk, and they came out with a military-grade flamethrower. And this was a young African. And, and he burnt the flag. He was arrested. They found out who he was. He wasn't charged with any felony or nothing because they said there was no real harm or damage, etc. And that's the disrespect that the colonizers have for the colonized. That they don't respect us in no form or shape or fashion. And we say, this is our flag that our people voted on in 1920 in New York City, voted on this as the flag of the African nation, and we wave it, and they burn it, and they say there was no real damage done, so they can't charge the person. Not that we want to get into charging him because he works for the government, whoever he was. He was taking out the task of the U.S. government. He didn't go to the corner store, the pawn shop to get a military-grade flamethrower that was supplied to him. And there's probably some young African who got caught up in the system, as they always do. And if you wanted to get out, this is something we want you to do. And of course, he did it. But his mandate came from the government. We're clear on that. So it just shows the utmost disrespect for people. And we're not surprised. Because if you can go to Africa from Europe, because you have these contradictions of scarcity, hunger, disease, and you have to find a way out. And you hear these stories about wealth in all these other lands. And I know they said they was trying to get, some spices. They was looking for spices and freedom from oppression from feudal society. And part of that may be true. But people had to voluntarily go because they was offered land and wealth. And since they had no access to ownership of land nor wealth, that was a good proposition to take, a chance to take and to build the new world. So in that course of solving European contradictions, it was done at the expense of African and other colonized people. Like I said, this is a different environment. Normally when I'm in an environment like that, I'm in another city, and we have to rent a room and go into the hood to organize. And the wealth of this society is dripping in African blood. It's dripping in the indigenous people blood. I'm sitting here, standing here, and I understand this is stolen land, right? And the people who own this land are on reservations. We call them concentration camps. They call them reservations. I don't think the indigenous people made a reservation to be there. You know what I mean? And they got there the same way we got here from Africa, through the point of the gun, the U.S. military. You know what I mean? So, you know, that's the contradictions that we understand. And if we don't understand that, we can't organize against it. If we don't understand the real nature of the problem, the root cause of the problem, we're not going to ever be able to fix it. And that's why the party is so important to the African working class. And I must say, it's an African working class revolutionary party with a revolutionary theory called African internationalism, meaning that we're one people, we're one nation, whether we're in the Caribbean, South America, on the continent, or in Brooklyn where I'm at. I'm an African, colonized in America. And I call it America only so that we can have a discussion, because we all know this is not America. America don't even exist except for the mind of the colonizers. And, you know, Europeans came here as Europeans, and they set up these first 13 colonies, and that's what they called them, colonies. You know what I mean? And that was the beginning of build of they call today the United States of America by Europeans. You know what I mean? They want to call themselves Americans because they want people to think they originated on this continent, on this land, and they did. This land belonged to the indigenous people. I just want to make that point to be clear in terms of what our politics is. So after that attack on July 2nd, with the flag burning, on July 29th, in St. Louis, the FBI, as the chairman said, at 5 o'clock in the morning, made a raid on the chairman's house on the north side of St. Louis. And by the way, the reason that we're in St. Louis in the first place is because the African working class rose up in fierce struggle after the assassination of Mike Brown. And if you remember that, you know, there was a whole bunch of media coverage. All kinds of so-called leaders came, and then they went. Once the media was gone, they were gone. They was out of town. The party went into St. Louis because they heard the masses, the African working class, say that the solution was to kill the police. It wasn't hands up, don't shoot. It was kill the police. And that's a statement of what people have summed up that, you know, like you have to talk the language of your oppressor. And we understand that they understand violence. You know what I mean? It's a culture of violence. So the chairman went into Ferguson, St. Louis, an African colony, like all of our communities are. That's not being gentrified, that is. To bring leadership and sharpen the contradiction and the solution in terms of kill the police wasn't just about some individual policeman. It's about the police represents the system. You understand? So when they said kill the police, they really were saying kill colonialism. You understand? And we went in there with that goal and objective is to raise that consciousness level But like our theory says, it's not just for us to explain to them what happened, who did it, and why, but we had to build the things that we say we're about, institutions, independent institutions that the African working class is in control of. We have the ability to do for self. We don't have to be beggars and beg your slave master to feed you beyond enough just to survive. So we went in there, and we're still there today. And it's just so happened, I'm just going to say this to sort of underscore it. You know, in that community, we had all these vacant lots and buildings, dilapidated, falling down. Youth was playing basketball in the streets, in traffic, etc. And one of the things, and I just want to say that because I think it highlights the stupidity of it, is that once we cleared this vacant lot and built a basketball court in gleaming red, black, and green colors, and to develop what we call the Vanguard basketball court, Vanguard being played on since the party's a Vanguard Revolutionary Party. It was right after that, and we celebrated the opening of the basketball court, that July 29th happened. And that's to say that the colonists never have no desire for African people or colonized people to be self-reliant, to be self-determining, to not be dependent on the system. And that's why they attacked the Black Panther Party. That's why they assassinated Fred Hampton. And that's why they attacked us on July 29th, not just in St. Louis, but in St. Petersburg, Florida. The same FBI governmental attack happened in St. Petersburg. And now we have what we call the chairman and others unindicted co-conspirators. And we just want to say, as a nation, as a people, the African working class, we all are unindicted co-conspirators because we colonized. And that happened, again, in the 1400s, when the colonizers decided to come to Africa, capture, enslave, and disperse African people all over the world. You know, that was their indictment of us. That was them sentencing us to a life of oppression, exploitation, to never realize freedom ever again. And I know people feel like they saved us from, a bad situation, good, and they, based on some of the philosophies of this government, whether it's the Monroe Doctrine, the white man's burden, etc., that was not some civilizing process. It was a dehumanizing process so that other people can benefit at our expense. And what the party is and says is that that has to end. You know what I mean? And no FBI, CIA, governmental intimidation is going to stop that process. Like some of the speakers talk about the new era we're in, just like in the 60s, that was led by the African working class. We have nothing to lose but our chains. We have to live a colonized life 24/7. There's no break from it, no respite from it. from the time you get up in the morning to the time you go to bed at night, if you survive, we're dealing with colonialism. And it's dehumanization, humiliation every day. And it's not just enough to be mad about that. We have to organize and do something about it to change it once and for all. And though I know people may think this is a struggle for all of humanity, because without Africa and its enormous resources, there would be no America. You understand? And the stolen labor, there would be no America. There would be no American wealth. There would be no large American military, CIA, FBI, none of that. And we recognize that. And we recognize the part we have to play in transforming that. And we have to lead, our struggle on our own terms. You know what I mean? So I really appreciate being here, and I hope you can support our campaign. Yeah. I appreciate it. We have some, so just to remind us for you, we have some flyers here that you can have. We're in this process right now of our defense fund, of course. They're trying to drain our money from our programs for the people so we can give it to lawyers to fight this bogus case. The only thing about that is that whatever we have to do to get free and to free our people, we have to do that. You know what I mean? That's just the way it is. We signed up for this. We signed up for it knowing what happened in the past, and that's because we know that the past is going to be the past, but we need to forge a new future for our people. You know what I mean? And that's clear. So, that's what the whole hands-off Uhuru means, and also is hands-off Africa. That's why we connect that, so people understand the importance of Africa in this struggle. You know what I mean? Because all the resources that people talked about in this room that's building nuclear bombs, et cetera, a lot of those resources come from Africa. Even the materials to build those things come from Africa. The phones and stuff that we use, the materials come from Africa, stolen, while our people are dying in mines, hungry and starving. That's what our struggle is about, to reverse that, just like the Cubans did. Before their revolution, America owned 90% of their mines, 80% of their transportation, all the banking system. But the Cuban Revolution broke the back of colonialism in Cuba and imperialism in Cuba. And that's why they under attack, 24/7, blockade. You know what I mean? They don't intend for the people to ever rise up and be self-governing, to be free, and to use our resources in our own interests. Imagine if all the resources that's going into imperialism from Africa and was going into the struggle of oppressed people around the world. Right? Instead of wasting those resources and wasting the lives that have to work to bring those resources out of the ground, and if they was in the hands of the party and the African working class, we're going to be uniting with all the other colonized and working people around the world, utilize those resources to help them reach their goals of self-determination. You understand? So, again, we'll have these flyers for you. We've got a couple of the Burning Spear newspapers. If you haven't had one, I have a couple. I want to appreciate the organizers of this event, different environment, but that's okay because we bring the revolution wherever we are, whoever we are. Hands off Uhuru! Hands off Uhuru! Hands off Uhuru! Hands off Uhuru! Hands off Africa.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shakur. Thank you for your time. We appreciate you. Well, so that was extremely sobering, enlightening, and important. And really, can we give him another hand? That was wonderful.